Hello, welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians. I'm your host, Cindy Howes. Welcome. There are many ways to support Basic Folk. If you have not had the opportunity, you can make a contribution at basicfolk.com/donate. You can sign up for our newsletter, also at basicfolk.com. Or you could follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Basic Folk Pod. You can tell your friends about us, or you can just chill out and listen to this episode, which I am glad that you're here to do. MC Taylor of His Golden Messenger, and it is hard to put into words why I love this guy so much, but I know when it started. His band, Durham's His Golden Messenger, stopped by to play live at WYEP in January of 2017. They were the first band I interviewed after Trump was inaugurated. Like a lot of people, and like the white liberal woman that I am, the state of things had shocked me awake. I wanted to use my platform differently, and this was the first interview where I attempted to get a musician to talk about tough issues. Mike picked up what I was laying down. He talked candidly about the president. He declared his band was against Trump and stood with marginalized people, but still invited anyone who voted for him to the show that night. It honestly was like a 10-second comment, but after that interview, I felt some pressure and anxiety inside of me release. It was something that I had wanted to do for a while, ask hard questions. Not necessarily about politics, and actually Mike didn't make it that political. I never forgot his grace and bravery in answering that question. This guy is so full of wisdom, and we get to experience that through his music and through his person. I'm so thrilled to talk to him about his music and latest album, Quietly Blowing It, although he's just released a His Golden Messenger holiday album called O Come All Ye Faithful, and a companion holiday release from his new project, Revelators, which he refers to as spiritual jazz and dub influenced. The guy is prolific. Mike was always playing music thanks to his music-loving parents. His dad played guitar outside of his school teaching career and would play occasional gigs around their home in Orange County, California. Mike spent some time in San Francisco in a hardcore punk and an alt-country band. He became burnt out on playing music and headed east to the University of North Carolina to study folklore. He decided to start writing and recording some music under the name His Golden Messenger, an homage to his complicated feelings about religion and love of the lo-fi. He's since released a dozen or so albums and EPs under that name, with a rotating cast of players backing him up. In our conversation, we cover topics including uncertainty, boundaries, and the state of music journalism. He also told me what the C stands for in MC Taylor, and he said no one ever asks that, no one knows, so I'll just keep that one to myself. We'll take a listen to a song from His Golden Messenger's latest non-holiday album. Here's Sanctuary, and then we'll get to our conversation with MC Taylor on Basic Folk.
Feeling bad, feeling blue, can't get out of my own mind. But I know how to sing about it. Ring a bell, a little lonely, I better hit the road, Jack. We can cry into the phone a while. Jubilee, find me, steady with your hope now. That little light's gotta last a while. Like an arrow to the marrow, I know it feels like hell. Do we make it to the other side? One good news, you want sanctuary. When you try to get real, or they break you. Sanctuary. That song like an offer to you, from the bottom to the bone.
I used to work at WYP in Pittsburgh.
I remember, yeah.
I don't know about you, but that was the first interview I ever did after Trump won. I was like pretty nervous and was so happy that it was you that I'd be talking to. I remember I pulled you aside to like talk about some questions, and I was like, well, I'm going to ask this one question. Is that okay? And you're like, well, I'm going to talk about Trump. And I was like, great.
Oh my God. I'm glad that worked out. I mean, that was a tough time. There's been a lot of that sort of feeling that I think we all collectively had hasn't really gone away, actually. Yeah, it's like a new way of being. Yeah, that time everybody was pretty shell-shocked.
Yeah. But it's like so important to like keep doing what you do and keep speaking out the way you speak out, because I think it has a huge impact in it. I mean, it resonated for me for a long time, and I'll never forget it, that interview we did. So it's nice to have you on again.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. I just like started tearing up. I don't know why. I'm just so happy to like talk to you.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. You're from California, and you have talked about how you do not feel spiritually connected to where you grew up. Like you had a wonderful childhood, and everything was fine, but you just don't relate to the place. When did you recognize that, and how did growing up in a place you didn't connect with help you in terms of like wanting to be connected by your surroundings?
Well, I was born in Bellflower, California, which is not Orange County, but I grew up in Orange County. And I was talking about this with a friend of mine today who is from Daytona Beach, Florida. Mm-hmm. And we were comparing notes about our connections or lack thereof of the places that we grew up. And he actually said something really good about his own relationship to the place, which basically, in short, was that, part of the reason he didn't feel a connection to the place he grew up was probably a lack of imagination on his part. So, like, when I say that I wasn't super connected to Irvine, California, or Orange County in general, even though I had a wonderful childhood, I think part of that is that I probably didn't put in the work actually to make that connection happen. It seemed to me that there were other places where that connection was very evident and easy to find. I don't know if that's actually true. But anyway, I felt that way at the time. I still struggle to like sort of find a connection to Orange County, California when I go back there. But there are also like layers of personal stuff in between me and the place. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's really on me, I think.
Yeah.
Like I have a very deep, super deep and abiding connection to California as a place. Like I don't think it will matter how long I live in the South. I'm always going to feel like a Californian. And every time I set foot in California, I feel like I've come home, and like that also took a long time to come to grips with, because when I left California, I think I was like, I think I'm done with this place. I'm going to go like start anew somewhere else. But the fact is California raised me, and I love it there. I have a really deep connection to that place. So yeah, it's complicated. There's so many emotions that come with, this sense of place is really so loaded, and in a lot, in most of the ways are really beautiful.
Yeah. So it sounds like music was kind of always around you growing up. Your dad was playing a beautiful guitar.
Yeah.
What kind of guitar was it again?
It was a 1964 Martin D28 that he bought. He bought brand new. I guess he was maybe 18 or 19. He bought it at McCabe's, which is a famous guitar store in Los Angeles, and I believe at that time they also had a store in Long Beach, California, and I know that I'm fairly certain that that's where he got his.
At the LBC.
In the LBC, yeah, exactly right. My parents lived in the LBC when they were young, like right after they'd gotten married and had both begun teaching. They lived in Long Beach for several years.
And I know that you are a huge music fan, music listener. You love sharing music as well. How did your experience as a young music listener and discoverer impact who you are today in terms of like as a music consumer? And I was trying to find like a better word than like sharer of music, like music connector.
Yeah. I don't know where that came from. My parents certainly liked music, but they weren't fanatical about it. They had a small collection of records, and the older I get and the bigger my record collection gets, the more I realize that like they were really like they liked music. My dad, is a great guitarist and singer, but like their musical interest didn't really run that deep, which is fine, totally fine. But there was enough in there in that collection to spark an interest, and like why or where this sort of like voracious appetite for music and collecting music comes from, I'm not really sure. I've always been like a pretty solitary person. I think that it was something, it was a universe that I could explore that felt completely boundless, that I could sort of explore by myself. And when I found something that I felt like would interest someone that I knew, then we could share. Music is a really beautiful place for community in so many different ways. But a lot of the early music that I was into, like I was the only person that I knew that was into that stuff, and I was just spending all my allowance on tapes, and I don't know. I don't really know. Like, I'm not sure what it is, but I'm still like so obsessive about music. I still buy records like all the time. There's so many politics about being a record collector, and or really like anybody that has a lot of knowledge about something, and it's easy for the world of record collectors or knowledge collectors to become like real kind of, there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens with it, and kind of like rules. That part I'm not really interested in.
You're not interested in rules? What a shocker.
Well, I just, like music is really joyful to me. And if I can turn someone on to something new that brings them joy as well, then that's like a really great feeling. But it's not the type of knowledge that I want to like lord over people or make people feel bad because they don't know about something. That's like that. I don't like that.
Oh my gosh, more on that later. Okay, so the story goes that you joined a hardcore band as an 18-year-old with Scott Hirsch, who you would then go on to be in a band with in San Francisco. You quickly burnt out and then moved to North Carolina to study folklore at UNC in Chapel Hill. And I imagine you had some like complex feelings about music at that moment.
I did. I mean, I had been I like that quick summation of those like 15 years. That's really good.
We
Or
only have
more.
an hour.
Yeah, I know. That's wonderful. I moved to North Carolina in 2007, and at that moment in time, I didn't know what my future was going to be as a musician or a songwriter. I didn't actually think there was going to be one. The band that I had been playing in with Scott, we sort of like wrapped it up. We'd made several records and done a bunch of touring, but it hadn't really resulted in anything. I just needed a change.
It just kind of sounded like it resulted in you being like, meh, about music, you know?
Well, I mean, my love of music was still totally there, but my understanding of like how I could even make $20 playing music, let alone enough to pay any kind of bill. I mean, I never made any money playing music until recently. I mean, shockingly recently. I won't even reveal when it was, in case there are any young musicians out there hoping to do it for a living. But I just I just came here and kind of floated, like I was writing songs. I was still devouring music. I was trying to like reconnect with the personal parts of music that felt like they had somehow gotten lost, or I had somehow lost sight of my previous band. I think like that was really the inflection point. I had already started working under the name Hiscold Messenger in San Francisco, like right before I moved to North Carolina.
Oh.
And I had decided that I was going to, whatever music I made in the future, it wasn't going to be a band. It was just going to be my thing. I'd make all the decisions. I'd pay for everything somehow. I don't know how, but I just, I didn't want to negotiate. Not in like a bad way, but I just found that when I negotiated, things never turned out the way that I had envisioned them. Yeah. Originally. I think like collaboration is really like the most magical part of music. But at that moment in time, I just I kept feeling like the things I was trying to do were not turning out right because there were too many opinions.
Right. Well, it's interesting you were talking earlier about being kind of a solitary person. It sounds like you were kind of recognizing the benefits of like leaning into your Lone Ranger style personality.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I was certainly spending a lot of time alone or with my wife, or shortly thereafter, like our first kid, Elijah. Elijah was born in 2009. So, it was around that time that I wrote Bad Dead. It's no surprise that particular record is such a loner record. It's just like me and acoustic guitar into a little cassette player. And that was kind of like this whirlwind of like, all of a sudden I understood like how I wanted to write songs, how I wanted to sing. There's a lot of stuff came together right at that moment. I think it was because I was spending a lot of time by myself, like actually really forcing myself to, or being forced to confront, to reckon with what was it that I could do with music. You know what I mean? I think a lot of that too was having a child.
Yeah. And
really like my time, I didn't have like free time. So I had to concentrate. It was a time of concentration.
So, okay, in 2010, you mentioned Bad Debt. You released this album as Hiscold and Messenger, and those are songs that you wrote in your own voice and ones that felt truly authentic to you. And like listening to you talk about that time and trying to figure out what you want to do with music, and I could be wrong, but I really feel like your boundaries were kind of like developing when it came to music, like, and that could be like totally a wrong observation, but I still want to know more about your boundaries. Like, you seem like a person who's like not going to do something if it doesn't serve you. And I don't mean that in like a selfish way, but in a way where like you have healthy boundaries and you know what's going to work for you or not going to work for you. And I see you as like a really good example of someone with very good boundaries. So how do you relate to your boundaries, and what was your path in creating them, and like what happens if you don't keep them, Mike?
This is like this feels like I'm at therapy right now. In a great way. This is how I do my therapy meetings as well. I mean, I am up for anything. But I think that it's really important for the music to feel genuine. I want people to be able to believe it when they hear a His Gold Messenger record. And it's such a subjective thing. It's hard to like explain what I mean when I say like it needs to feel genuine, but I think like we all kind of know what it means when or what, when we hear something that we believe and we're like, that sounds real. That sounds like that person is in it. Like that's what I want. So like maybe the like realness of the music is what defines the boundaries. If I can incorporate something into my music in a way that feels genuine, then I'm up for it. I mean, it really depends. Sometimes I think about this stuff. Sometimes I don't. I'm certainly never thinking about it when I'm like writing songs or making a record. But I made this other record that's coming out in the spring under a completely different name called Revelators. And there's no singing. It's basically like a sort of free jazz or spiritual jazz mixed with like super textural ambient stuff, but it's also very rhythmic. It shares a certain DNA with His Golden Messenger, but then it also doesn't. It's kind of like this place that I put all this stuff that I haven't found a way to incorporate in a His Golden Messenger record yet, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And like it's pretty out, but it feels very real, in a totally different way.
That's cool. I read about the Revelators, and I actually like couldn't think of a question to ask about them, so I'm glad you brought them up.
Oh yeah.
Around the time that you put out Bad Debt, you said life was pretty good. You were a new dad. You were experiencing some new things. But we talked about kind of like the severe lack in your artistic life. And I found this quote from you that said, "I'm to the point where I don't have any money anymore. I don't have a way to get together with the folks I normally play with. I was sort of at loose ends, and it was sort of bleak. I wasn't sure how I was going to engage this part of my life that's so important to me, aka music." So recently on Basic Folk, I've been exploring with guests like making music for music's sake. And the gift of bankruptcy, financial or otherwise, came up when I was reading about Amy Helm and talking to Amy Helm about Levon's experience of like bankruptcy, cancer, addiction recovery, and then like out of that, the Midnight Rambles formed, and his amazing third act came out of that. What can you say about how you operate when you're experiencing a deficit in your life?
It's hard to know. There have been a few there are a few different kinds of deficits, maybe. Like the era that Bad Debt was written during, it felt like I had kind of burned everything to the ground, not in a bad way, but it's just like I was just a stranger. I was a stranger in a new place, but I was also full of inspiration. We had our first kid, which is just life changing and continues to be, and I was excited. I didn't know what was coming, but I was excited. I think generally speaking, like being creative is always like a rejuvenating and hopeful place to be. Like whenever I'm feeling low, if I can actually work up the inspiration to just come into this room that I'm in right now and pick up a guitar, I always feel better. You know what I mean? I can come up with a million different reasons why I don't want to do that. But I do know from experience that being creative is always healing for me. Mm-hmm. That's a big one. I mean, are you asking like what happens when you're out of ideas?
No, not when you're out of ideas. I mean, in terms of like, it had never occurred to me, like, to hear Amy talk about, if you all of a sudden woke up tomorrow and you didn't have any money, like, my first initial thought would be, like, this is an emergency, But,
right.
like, from that, the way that you react to the crisis
Sure.
Can be inspiring, and it can be exciting to kind of, like, discover something about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think in situations like that, like I have to think that, well, I don't know. I can't speak for Levon or Amy. That seems like when she's described that time to me, it seems like a pretty stressful time.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, like, whether the beauty of reinvention was evident in the moment. It certainly is now, like when we look back and there's this kind of like grassroots lifting up of this person and his community and like this celebration of his musicality. I don't know. I mean, he's a guy that it feels like everybody wanted to root for. Like such a beautiful soul.
His Golden Messenger has like reached this point of recognition, even if you just learned how to make money. Your band, it seems like, has reached a recognition, like you receive coverage and accolades and seem to go on some nice tours. And I was reading something from you that made it seem like you don't enjoy what you called the weird public recognition thing. Like, you'd rather play with your friends for no money to an empty room than a huge gig sponsored by some like terrible brand that pays a lot of money.
I mean, that sounds like me being like pretty holier than thou. I'll definitely take a brand's money if they're offering it. But
all right. But there is like a balance to that, right?
No. There's a balance, like I'm a really big Grateful Dead fan, and I am a big fan of this podcast that has been running the past couple of years. And just today I was listening to an episode, and it talks about how that band really lamented when they could no longer play these small, beautiful theaters that they loved to play at. They had to play stadiums just because the business demanded it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that I'm even remotely in that place, but like it felt when I heard them talking about that, I was like, yeah, I can see how that would be like something. It would feel, I don't know. There's just this like dropping away of innocence, like that is such a beautiful part of making music. Yeah, I mean, like the anyone that I know that is quote unquote famous seems like that's something that they have to deal with. It's not something that they enjoy, and it certainly doesn't feel like something that would be fun in any way. You know what I mean? When people see me out and about and someone comes up and says, "Hey, I love your music," that's totally cool. It's like it's an honor. You know what I mean? Like, what an honor to have some stranger come say that to me.
Not part of the weird public attention.
It's just like this sort of like mill of publicity sometimes is kind of like, I don't know. There's always a moment in a publicity cycle. This is not part of it, by the way. We're like past it. And like for this holiday record we're putting out, I said like, no, let's not do any interviews or anything. There's always a moment though, in like any record cycle, publicity cycle, where I'm just like, what is this? Why do we have to do this? Nobody needs this. Nobody cares about this. Like, I can't describe the songs like you're gonna hear it's cliche to say it, but like the songs describe the songs so much better than I can in an interview. Yeah. It takes longer. That's the problem. It takes a little bit longer. So I don't know. We're not in a collective time where people want to deal with things that take longer, but
Your answer just exploded several questions. So you were on a podcast called The Show on the Road. So he brought up this review someone gave you that was not a very good review. Do you remember this conversation?
Not really.
I was driving on the highway listening to this, and I almost crashed my car. Your answer was so good. So this review kind of like missed the point of your music, and your answer to that was that you were talking about rethinking about how art works, how artists evolve, and that you have to be really sharp if you're going to be a critic to understand how an artist's work is unfolding. And this made me think of like, it kind of like stems into what you were just talking about. I don't know if I want you to answer like your take on the state of music journalism, but it made me think of like the quality of journalism that has been happening recently, how, you know, based on many different things in our culture, my perspective is that the quality has gone down. Like, you have people who are like wonderful writers out there, but there's just not this like emphasis on getting great writers and journalists to cover music. It just seems like a lot of, you know, trying to get a lot of hits, trying to get a lot of eyeballs on things, and the quality suffers in return.
Yeah. I mean, I have lots of things to say about that. Whenever I get a bad review and I'm feeling like stung by it, I always think like, what is the point of this sort of like hot take music journalism? At this moment in time, when there is so much chaos and grief in our world, wouldn't it be better to write about something that you love instead of something that you hate or something that you're kind of like, I'm not like a big fan of this? Wouldn't it be better to write about something that you love? Once the sting of like getting a bad review wears off a little bit, like, I still kind of feel that way. Maybe my position softens a little bit after the sort of like anger fades. I still do feel that the most joyful, innovative writing about art comes from a place of enthusiasm, right? Like, I think that music criticism is really valuable. Like, I love to read a great writer writing about great music. That to me is like a beautiful coalescing of two things that I love: great writing and great music. But the like culture of music, or like sort of the culture of hot takes, right? To like sort of grab eyeballs maybe, is kind of, it feels like kind of worn out. It feels kind of worn out to me. A lot of music writers are not going to be music writers by the time I put my next record out. You know what I mean? And I mean, that's something both to be like, to lament, and also it's something to be like, yeah, see, you gotta have some stick with it. You know what I mean? You gotta do it for no money. You know, that's how you like sort of sharpen your craft. It's kind of like I have both those feelings about it. But then at the same time, like, when I read a music writer that really is like really on the ball, Amanda Petrusich is one, or Jessica Hopper, like, it's really, it can elevate, it can feel like it's elevating the music in some way.
Okay, let's talk about different sides of your personality. I don't know how to start this question other than I found this quote where you were talking about, I'm lucky enough to have a language that I can use to articulate my emotions, and that's something not a lot of other people have. I feel like that's my daily mantra. I'm doing this because it's beautiful for me to do it, not because I'm trying to make a lot of money, and that's something people can feel. I feel like I've like always known this version of you. Like, I don't know, his Golden Messenger, Mike, and I'm just getting to know like this version of myself that like, wants to lean in and show people this like vulnerable inside world. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but I also kind of fear for the side of me that's like the guardian of the inside, and for me, that person is like funny and sarcastic, kind of like the entertainer. And I don't want that to like go away, or for people to like forget about that. I don't know if that's something that you relate to, like being protective of your shell, and like, how do we keep them both? Is this a weird question? Do you want to skip this one?
No, I like it. I mean, I'm not sure. I think you just do both. And you just hope that, hope and assume that the people that you're closest to, or that you want to be close to, or that you admire and would like to have a relationship with, you just hope and assume that they are gonna get that you're a multifaceted person, that it has the sweet and the sour too. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's like that. Art that I love is always vulnerable. There's always like a vulnerable part of art that I love, and I felt like that was something that I could transmit in a way that felt real in my own work. So sometimes, like, I kind of think that like that's what a lot of people think that I am, is just this vulnerable sort of
open wound.
Sort of. I mean, but I don't know. I have no control over that. And maybe I'll meet some of those people someday and they'll understand that I'm also like I'm just like this, just like a normal, not normal, but just, I'm just a person that is like, some days I'm feeling low and wide open, and some days I just like, want to smoke some weed and just be silly. I don't know.
Yeah. I think if listeners are listening right now and you want like a really good example of something that Mike's done recently, I think the lyric video for Hardly Town is like a really good example of showing your both sides of yourself, like, because I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm watching you flip the cards down like Bob Dylan, and I'm like laughing my head off. Like, you're hilarious in that video, and it's just like so good. If anyone's looking we'll put it on the website. Yeah, you can check it out. Okay. All right, quick question, and then we'll get to another question. This is a joke because it's not a quick question. How are you feeling about God these days?
I mean, fine.
Fine.
I don't know. How are you feeling about God these days?
Fun. Throw it back at me. Fine as well. You have this like view on God and religion. I wasn't sure if your view had changed, where it sounds like you're very comfortable with like just being like fine and like not knowing. And it made me want to know about how you have approached uncertainty. Like, when you first started writing these His Golden Messenger songs, there's a lot of questions, but not a lot of answers. So how have you grown closer to being comfortable with uncertainty, and how has your music helped you get there?
I mean, I don't like the sort of living with uncertainty about being a higher, I don't know, not a higher power, but God. It's not something that I've ever struggled with any discomfort over. Not even for a second. It's never even occurred to me. Like, it's just, I'm interested in this idea about there being a sort of architect of things, because I feel like there are moments in which I have felt like I was in the presence of what some people would call God. Those moments are always either having to do with creation, with music, like just feeling so inspired and elated in the moment that I feel sort of like transcendental. Mm-hmm. Or moments like with my kids, where the feeling of and my family and my wife, just like the feeling of love and connection is so powerful that I've thought to myself, like, this must be what God feels like to other people, like just this overwhelming sense of like just gratitude and joy. I think that those universes, which for me are all completely mixed together, that's what I think, God is for me. And I don't think that it's all that different from what they're talking about in church, frankly. Like I feel like church services are often trying to conjure a transcendental moment, a sort of ecstatic moment that feels very similar to what I think I feel in my moments. So like, I do think that there's a God, and I think that that's what it is for me. Do I believe in like a Christian theology? I mean, I certainly don't subscribe to the type of Christianity that people seem to talk about on the news when they're trying to make it harder for trans people to exist, or for for some 18-year-old girl to get an abortion, That to me is a complete perversion of what I understand the teachings of someone like Jesus Christ to be. You know what I mean? Like the American style of Christianity that is wielded like a club by the GOP is like completely disgusting and shameful.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, and it's a tough one. And I think that people that are very connected to their faith, that think progressively, are in a really tight spot. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've had to I really want to be clear that I think that there are American Christians that are amazing and super progressive and powerful community builders. I went on a walk with a friend of mine today that I often go walking with, who is a pastor in Durham, and I don't attend his church or any church, but
is this your Daytona friend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's super right on. He's like right on the money with everything. You know what I mean? And yeah, he must be very frustrated to turn on the news and see a politician like sort of using this thing that he feels is so affirming and beautiful, using it to hurt people.
Let's talk about your latest non-holiday album.
Okay.
Quietly Blowing It. So at the end of 2019, back when we were all innocent and didn't know what was coming, you were feeling pretty burnt out from being on the road for like 7 years straight. What was your state of mind at that point, and how did that burnout feel once like the pandemic started to settle in?
When the pandemic first started and I thought that we were all going to be just home for a month or two. Remember when they were saying like 3 weeks and then we'll be back to it?
Yes.
I was feeling pretty happy, to be honest. I was feeling pretty happy to be able to be home and not be traveling. I'm still pretty happy, actually. I mean, I've gotten a little stir crazy, like when you travel for a living for long enough, being stationary feels strange. And actually I love traveling and I love being on tour. But at the time I was kind of like, I mean, what's this going to go on for? Even if it went on for 2 months or 3 months, I mean, and there's no way that could happen, but even if it did, like, I'd be great. Here we are, like, almost 2 years later. I mean, it's tricky because, at the same time that I was feeling like, oh, I can breathe, like, I can just take a breath here. Like, I also was fully cognizant of the fact that there was so much suffering and grief and devastation.
So you've always had this like really great groove to your songs, and this album, Quietly Blowing It, is no exception. Some may say it's your grooviest album, Mike.
Really? Cool.
That's what I read on the internet. Grooviest album. Yeah. What was your relationship to rhythm on the album in terms of like helping you communicate your songs, and did it feel any differently than other albums?
I mean, I wanted to make a record that felt like super, like I had the time to create what I thought was going to be like the purest version of His Gold Messenger, meaning like I just wanted the record to feel good, to feel like swinging. Even the slow songs needed to feel like kind of swinging. And I spent a lot of time playing drums myself, actually, in this room, in this tiny little room. And so I'm a terrible drummer, but I have a decent feel. You know what I mean? So I could like play these grooves that like had the grooviness but had like none of the chops. And then I could show my buddy Matt McCon, who played drums on he's played drums on many of my records, but I could show him and be like, okay, look at what I'm doing here. Now just play it like someone that knows how to play. And he'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, this totally makes sense.
Was it scary to play it for your drummer?
No, because I was recording it. Like there's a version of Quietly Blowing It that is me playing everything. That maybe
release the tapes.
Yeah, maybe someone will hear someday. And so, I mean, I spent a lot of time. I like really sweated over this stuff that I was just going to use to show everybody. So like by the time I got it to Matt to listen to hear what I was wanting him to play, you know, it was like super rudimentary, but I had spent many hours trying to get it right. And so he was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Yeah, it makes sense. He didn't understand how much sweat I had put into the whole thing.
You've spoken about the pandemic making you question certain things about what you have to do as a professional musician, like mainly leaving home and going on tours. Where are you with those kind of trade-offs, and what changes will you make, and what changes do you see your peers making?
I think it's a little too soon to know, honestly. I mean, shows are coming back, but there's still a lot of second guessing. We're still seeing a lot of people cancel their tours. I don't know. I hope that when we get back to a place that feels like the world that we knew, if we ever get back to that, I hope that we can sort of like take some of these feelings that we've all had. I'm certainly not alone in having them. I hope we can take some of them and actually make some changes. I mean, the thing is, like, you know, it's really more like if I'm complaining about having to be on tour all the time, then people will say, well, then just don't. I mean, no one's forcing you to go on tour. Just do half the number of shows. And that means, like, will I be content with half the amount of money? That's really what it is. It's like, yeah. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Like, but, you know, but that's like an existential question that is a really great one to ask. Would you be okay making less money if you had more time at home? I mean, that's like a very legitimate question.
And then it brings us back to the bankruptcy question.
Right. And then we go bankrupt.
Yep. Okay, before you go, will you do the lightning round?
Sure.
Should we make it holiday themed?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know much about holiday music.
We'll do 3 holiday lightning round questions, and then we'll do the other lightning round questions. You will love it. Ready? Here we go. Who is your favorite of Santa's reindeer?
Oh, I mean Rudolph. The other reindeer all seem so bitchy.
What was your favorite Christmas ornament growing up?
Oh, I think I can remember my mom actually, now that I think a little harder about it, my mom made a bunch of ornaments that still are in circulation that were like made of felt, and some looked like bells. The bells are the ones I can remember, and I like those actually. She made some of those and sent them to us, and we put them on our tree here as well.
It's amazing the nostalgia I feel when I see all of the ornaments.
I know.
From when I was a kid. Yeah.
I know. Very, very true. Yeah.
Who's your favorite character on National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation?
I mean, Chevy Chase is, what's his name?
Clark
Griswold. Oh, wait a second. Is Beverly D'Angelo in that still?
Mm-hmm.
Beverly D'Angelo's great. So I'm kind of like confusing Christmas Vacation and European Vacation.
Mike, they're two completely different movies.
I know, they're totally different. Is Randy Quaid in the Christmas one?
Eddie.
Yeah, right. He's like the brother, maybe?
He is married to Beverly D'Angelo's cousin. So they call him Cousin Eddie.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, Randy Quaid has really gone off the deep end. But he's a good one.
All right, we'll do the other real lightning round questions. That was good. Who is the nicest musician you've ever met?
They've almost all been nice. I don't think you get to have like a super long and successful career if you're shitty. You know what I mean? Like, I there's this myth that you have to be like cutthroat and stuff, but I totally think that myth was written by someone that's no longer in the music business. The nicest musician I've ever met. I mean, so many. Like, the first person that popped into my head is Ben Montench.
Oh, I like that.
I love him. I'm a big fan. But then I also thought about Buddy Miller, who's a guitar player, and he's also like a super duper sweetheart.
Two very generous people.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last one. Where is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
A couple summers ago, before COVID, I went with my family. I'm married to a Mainer, so I spend my summers in Maine. And we went to Cadillac Mountain, which is a mountain in Maine. Do you know it? You must. You're from Massachusetts, so
what part
maybe.
I've never heard of it, but what part of it is it? Like southern Maine?
No. Well, I don't know. Maine is so huge, so I don't know if this was. To me, it's north because it's a couple hours north of Portland. But we went to Cadillac Mountain, and we went up on the mountain at sunset. There were like tons of other people there. It's like a thing. You go up to the top of the mountain for sunset.
Oh, it's in Acadia.
Yeah, it's in Acadia. And it was absolutely stunning. Like 360-degree views of just like beauty. I don't know if that's the most beautiful place, but like pretty dang beautiful.
We'll accept that.
Okay.
As your answer.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm a huge fan of you as a person and you as a musician, so it really means a lot that you took the time.
Thanks, Cindy. I appreciate it.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by Sarah Siplak. Alex Stanton of Townspeople composes our music. Basic Folk is on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. You can find all of our episodes wherever you found this episode of Basic Folk and where you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.